Hi, this is the Love Your Life Show with Susie Pettit, Certified Life and Wellness Coach. Join Susie as she helps you with your wellness and mindset so you can live a life you love. Let's go, warriors!
Warriors, hello and welcome! It is me, Susie Pettit, your Certified Life and Wellness Coach. How are you today? Well, if you're not amazing, you're gonna be after you listen to this podcast, because this one's an awesome one. It is about something that has transformed my life and brought great freedom, lightness, and life satisfaction to my life. The concept is unconditional love, and while it's probably not a new term for you, since it's not a way we were raised, it's an area where there is probably still a lot of opportunity for your growth. I'm saying that because I know there is for me. A whole lot of it. Okay, so listen in. I'm psyched to bring this to you. Before I start, I do need to have a little asterisk and say this episode is not for you if you are in an emotionally, verbally, or physically abusive relationship. Unconditional love of your partner is something we work on way later. Okay, it's something that Paul and we have both been in those abusive relationships. We now have unconditional love of our partners. We have no relationships or contact with them. That is after many years of being out of that relationship. If you are in the situation now, you're actively in that relationship, meaning you're relating to them one-on-one in like any sort of way. I think you get the point of what I'm talking about. Schedule a one-on-one session with me or another coach. Okay. And listen to this episode with the intent to put it towards the relationship in your life you have with yourself, okay, and with the other people in your life. They're great skills and tools to be learned here, but this is not something we do not practice unconditional love in the abusive relationship while it's still going on. Okay, I was in that situation, and if I thought that I needed to do something different or think in a different way to support the relationship, that would have been 100% unhelpful and not at all what I'm all about on this show. Okay, so moving on. If you're in that sort of relationship, I send huge love to you. Schedule a one-on-one session with me. If you're not, keep listening, because this concept and practice of unconditional love is where the glory is in life. Okay, first I want to back up a bit, because as you know, if you've been listening, I podcast weekly. Okay, and I usually record a couple weeks in advance. And I have a running list of things I want to podcast on and upcoming topics. And I had a topic I thought I was going to podcast on today. And yet, often, the universe sort of comes along and is like, other plans for you, Susie. That's what happened this week. And so I just wanted to share. Because two things came up that prompted me to change what I was going to podcast on today. And I will get back to that subject at a later date. But right now, these seemed more relevant. And I'm going with what the universe was tapping me about. Okay, first, I overheard my husband talking to one of our sons on the phone yesterday. Okay, our son is thinking of changing course in an area of his life and was calling to get his dad's advice. And ultimately, what all kids want, his support and approval. Okay, so as Paul, my husband, was wrapping up the conversation, I heard him say to him, "Hey, you know, whatever you choose, I support you, whether it works out really well or whether it doesn't. I'm glad you called to share with me what you're thinking of doing, because I love hearing what's happening in your life. But whether I think what you're doing is right or wrong isn't the point. I support you and I love you." And then he hung up the phone and turned back to the oven and went back to making dinner like nothing had just occurred. Well, I was sitting there like, hot damn, Paul. Didn't he just say what we all wish we had been told as kids, or even now to this day? That we were loved and cherished, no matter whether we fell on our face or won the award? Am I the only one that's thinking, holy whoa? Like, if my dad had said that, what differences would have happened in my life? The message of hey, Susie, it's not what I think that matters. No matter what you choose, I love and support you. Things work out for us, or something like that. That was the first, oh my gosh, I need to podcast on something about this tomorrow. Okay, showing, Paul's showing of his unconditional love and support for one of our sons just floored me. Okay, which leads me to the second thing that prompted me to record this podcast is that I went to my first Australian wedding last weekend and they mentioned unconditional love in their vows. Okay, my coach brain was like, interesting. I remember my first marriage and we threw around he's now my ex-husband, and I remember how we threw around the concept of unconditional love. And yet I went into that marriage so full of conditions. It's almost comical, but I didn't see it as that. Okay? I had conditions for myself. I had conditions for him. Let me explain. Unconditional love is loving without conditions. Loving someone no matter what. Sure, as most of our vows say, love them when they're healthy or sick. That's the physical health. But how about the emotional health? Do we commit to loving them when they're happy? How about when they're crabby? It gets a little complicated, eh? And I'm here to encourage us not to make it complicated. To choose to love the people in our lives unconditionally. Okay? Whether it's our spouse or our kids or our dear friends, we get to choose. Will we love them conditionally or unconditionally? You choose to love them whether they bring the garbage out, and you choose to love them when they don't. You choose to love them when they do their homework, and you choose to love them when they don't do their homework. You love them when they return your text quickly, and you love them when they are late for coffee or tea. Okay, you love them when they ask how big your big work presentation went, and you love them when they forget that you were stressed about work. You love them when they exhibit excellent sportsmanship on the field, and you love them when they act like an ass. You love them when they tell you the truth about where they were last night, and then you love them when they lie to you. I will be doing a podcast episode next week on boundaries, because this is not about just, they get to lie to you or they get to act like an ass. Boundaries go hand in hand with unconditional love. But for this episode, I want to focus on unconditional love. Loving no matter what. Loving that other person. Not accepting behavior. Behavior is different. But choosing thoughts that create love. In my second marriage, I changed my vows up a bit. I vowed to Paul that I committed to love him. Period. End of story. I did not have conditions like he's there to make me happy. Or that he's there to meet my needs. I'm certainly welcome to ask for him to meet my needs. But if he chooses not to, that's his choice. Okay, your spouse, my argument and what I view unconditional love, your spouse is in your life to love. Okay, he or she is there as a companion on your journey together. The reason why I marry and why I got married the second time was to show my boys a vision of healthy, unconditional love with boundaries in a marriage. My job is to love Paul. He is there for me to love, to pour love on, to practice loving thoughts. Does this mean it's easy? Hell no. Does this mean he always does what I want him to do? No. He's a human. Okay, and he's not me. So what I think he should be doing is not what he thinks he should be doing, clearly. Okay, so it's not always easy to do conditional love, but this is what relationships are here for. Relationships are here to help us grow. Growth comes with discomfort. Have you heard me say that before? Okay, ease is not the point. This isn't Disney World, warriors. Notice how the Disney movies cut out when Prince and Cinderella walk down the aisle? Because then it's all happily ever after, right? Bullshit. That's when the fun begins. Relationships are containers where we get to grow. Marriage and with our kids and with our friends. Okay, marriage, I like to think of, it's all about your inner child wounds bumping up against your partner's inner child wounds and the potential for growth and involvement. Okay, with our kids, it's similar. The things that trigger us about our kids are things that trigger us about ourselves. The conflicts show us where we have inner healing or understanding to do, where we have unconditional love to give to ourselves. Which leads me to, how could we possibly make unconditional love easier? Because it's not easy. It is not easy. But there are two things that make it easier. Okay, one is us having unconditional love for ourselves. And two is us having a strong foundation / understanding of emotional intelligence. First, us loving ourselves unconditionally. It's incredibly hard, if not impossible, to love our kids, our spouse, our friends, heck, strangers, if we don't unconditionally love ourselves. If we love ourselves with conditions, it is extremely likely we will pass that same treatment on to others. So pause and ask yourself, how much love and compassion do you have for yourself when you mess up? How much patience do you have for yourself and your human experience and mess ups, knowing there is no perfect human out there? If you don't have patience with yourself, you will be hard pressed to have it for others. An example I hear often is I hear from clients who are so annoyed at their kid for not doing their homework. When their kid, like just at dinner, was like, after dinner, I'm going to do my homework because it'll feel good to get it done. Okay? And then the mom or dad goes upstairs to check on them, and the kid is on their phone. And when they're asked, when the parents are like, hey, how's your homework going? They start sobbing. They're like, don't ask me. I'm so frustrated. I didn't get to it. Okay? And things dissolve from there. Usually later, and the parent is so frustrated, I must say. Usually later on in the same session with the same client, said client will report how frustrated she is with herself, with her progress with one of her goals. Maybe she'll say something like, I wanted to walk when the kids were in school and I've only done it twice. I'm so annoyed with myself. Do you see the correlation? What would happen if she was like, and this is what I help with in coaching sessions, it's like, hey, why haven't you walked more than, like, what? Let's look at that kindly. Okay, let's see what's going on. Let's look at why our kid didn't do the homework. Let's see what's going on. The kinder and more accepting we are of our humanness and our fallibility and having we have this primal brain in our head. Okay? The kinder and more accepting we can be with our own humanity, the kinder and more accepting we can be with others. And I gotta say, it takes work. Hey, we are modeled in this society to tangle ourselves up into this codependent tangle of a mess and say things like, well, if he loved me, he would. Or if she loved me, she would. Those are conditions, warriors. That's conditional love. And trust me, I can coach to this because I used to love myself very conditionally. Okay, I used to have so many conditions on myself. I loved myself with so many conditions when I was younger. Okay, if I ate the right foods. I loved myself if I said the right things. I loved myself if I did the right exercise. And boy, did I beat the crap out of myself if I didn't do those things. If I didn't abide by my conditions, I turned into a mean tyrant in my head. I only showed love to myself if I met my expectations, if I cleaned my house the way I thought I should, or if I parented the way I thought I should, or if I exercised the way I thought I should. If I fell short of my expectations and conditions, sheesh, got mean in my head. Maybe you're still there. Maybe you're still at that mean place in your head. Ask yourself, how do you act with yourself when you say the quote-unquote wrong thing? Or do the quote-unquote wrong thing at work or at home? Or maybe you act or say something at a social or family gathering. Do you beat yourself up in your head? Are you harsh and judgmental of yourself? Or do you choose to think the thought, I'm doing the best I can. Humaning is hard. My coach, Brooke Castillo, taught me every judgment is really just a projection. Something you see within yourself and you see in someone else and have a judgment about. Okay, positive or negative. When we are less judgmental with ourselves, when we accept the light and the dark of ourselves, the humanity, the fallibility, we are more able to love the light and dark of others. So much of our inability to love others unconditionally comes from our programming that we needed to be perfect to receive love. When we allow ourselves to have flaws, we allow others to have them too. This is why I say over and over and over and over again. What are we? It's episode 216, you guys. 216 episodes of the Love Your Life show, and I bet I've mentioned it at least that many times, that it all starts with being that kind observer of ourselves, that self-compassion, radical self-acceptance of the good and the bad, the light and the dark. There is no all light or all good person out there. When we can be patient and loving with ourselves when we mess up, we are more likely to be patient and loving with others when they mess up. When we can feel love for ourselves, flaws and all, we are more likely to feel love for the other people in our lives when they show us their flaws. And we might think thoughts like they're doing the best they can. The more love and understanding you have for yourself in your humanness and your human experience, the more capacity you have to love another. That's an area we can certainly work on. What fun. Practice loving yourself. The second way we can make unconditional love easier is to understand emotional intelligence, what the thought model illustrates. There are circumstances that happen in our lives, and from those circumstances we think thoughts, which are just sentences in our head, which cause feeling states. From our feelings, we take action, and our actions create the results in our life. So think, feel, act, loop. Okay, think of the thought model. Love is in the feeling line. It is something you feel. Why do we feel what we feel? It's because of the thoughts we're thinking. So how do we feel loving? How do we feel more love to the people in our lives or to ourselves? We think thoughts of love. Our partners, our kids, our parents, our friends, they're all in the C line. The things they do or don't do are all in the C line. So when my kid forgets a birthday, I can choose thoughts that generate a feeling of love, or I can choose thoughts that don't. It's my choice. When my kid lies to me, I can choose thoughts that generate a feeling of love. Like, I wonder why he chose to lie about that. He must be having something's going on. Or I can choose thoughts that don't generate love and think something like, how dare he lie to me? He's being so disrespectful. Doesn't he know I'm his mom? Those thoughts will not generate love. They will generate irritation and annoyance. Those are not a way I want to feel about my kid. Further, if you unconditionally loved and supported yourself, I would argue, like, if you didn't question your mom awesomeness, why would you make his lie mean anything about your value as a mom? Like, why does it have anything to do with you? Okay, why wouldn't you instead see his lie as a sign of his showing you something's going on with him? Like, their behavior is always telling us something, I say. So this emotional intelligence here and the thought model, it's showing you that we have a choice. We have a choice. Okay, how do we want to feel about those that we're in love with? I'm here to encourage us all to choose love. It always feels better to love us and to love them. Okay, they don't know, like these other people. I mean, earlier on the podcast, I was talking about my ex. He doesn't know whether I love or hate him. Okay, he might be sitting right now at, like, say I hated him, and I'm sitting here thinking thoughts of how he wronged me and how he screwed me on the child custody, and he's such an evil man, and I'm thinking all these thoughts. He might be sitting somewhere having a Mai Tai, just like hamming it up. My thoughts and my feelings do nothing for him. Who do they hurt? Me. Okay, that's that old expression. It's like, you think your anger is hurting them. You know, anger is poison. You drinking poison, expecting the other person to die. Okay, this is work for us to do. And it's a choice for us. I encourage you to choose love. Next week, I want you to listen in because I address a question I heard on Glenn's podcast where I think more info was needed and where this idea of unconditional love sometimes has some bad, it's like a bad after effect. The question on the show was about, can you have boundaries and unconditional love? And oh dear warriors, make sure you subscribe to my show at smbwell.com/subscribe. Because I dropped some truth bombs that, fingers crossed, will get me as a future spot as a guest on Glennon's show, because they did not address them in a way that I think was incredibly helpful for the audience there. Okay, let's just suffice it to say, unconditional love goes hand in hand with boundaries. Okay, until next week, I want you to practice loving. Practice thinking thoughts that generate a feeling of love in you, and practice noticing when you're not feeling love, when you're feeling irritated, when you're feeling annoyed. Okay? Some thoughts I like to practice that help me get to that loving place is humaning is hard. Humaning is hard. Like, say my husband or one of my sons does something, or the neighbor, or I'm just like, humaning is hard. They're doing the best they can. Okay, those are two thoughts that help me. Humaning is hard. They're doing the best they can. Okay, I also encourage you to turn that on yourself. Humaning is hard, dear warrior. You're doing the best you can. The more you can give yourself a friggin' break, okay, the better it is for everyone. And before I leave, I just want to return to Paul's message to our son. So before you use that example that I gave you to beat yourself up in your own parenting, which is not unconditional love, like being like, whoa, why can't I parent more like that? Use this as a reminder that it's never too late to parent differently. Never too late. Both Paul and myself have regrets from how we parented our younger kids. Yet now that we know better, we do better. Okay, if we think it's too late, that's the thought. Well, we think it's too late. How do we feel? What action do we take? Well, the result is it is too late. Don't think it's too late. It is never too late to pour love on your child, no matter your age or theirs. It is never too late to model unconditional love and radical self-acceptance. It's so exciting. We can do it everywhere. Shine that out. Shine that model out. Okay, the great news is if your child is below the age of 25, my parenting class leads you through exactly how to do this in 3 simple online modules. If you're feeling a little confused, take that, smbwell.com/parenting. Learn how to reverse past pains and protect against future ones. I'm just going to leave with this message that it is never too late to pour love on someone. And I would just love it if this week you started with yourself. Big love to you, warriors.
Thank you for listening to the Love Your Life show. If you want to hear more from Susie and support the show, be sure to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. Also, leave a review and share this podcast with friends and family. Go get 'em, warriors.